Hello everyone, welcome back to my channel, and today we are going to see the Knight vs Pawn Endgames part 2. As you know, last time in part 1 we saw theoretical positions when the king was in the corner and all the positions were based around the kings. But this time none of it is the case, as this time we are going to see theoretical positions with Knight versus the Rook Pawn. And also a small note and a disclaimer that this is the not last part of Knight vs Pawn Endgames, as Knight vs Pawn Endgames are just vast and covering them in just 2 parts is simply not possible. We'll be coming up with many more parts, so stay tuned for that. And without wasting any time, let's just get started. So in this video, first we are going to see two tactics which will probably tell you that how the knight versus pawn end games actually work and why the position of the pieces is very important in these end games. And then we have three brilliant exercises for you all to probably test your knowledge or something, but they're also important a lot. And also you can pause the video in between so that you can get a clear idea of what you are thinking and does your idea match with the ideas which I have or the computer says, or which are the correct moves. So let's just start. This is the first tactic which I have for you. And now, in this position it is white to play and it's your turn. You need to find the best move continuation for white over here. You can pause the video over here. I hope you have found the answer. The move is the brilliant knight to g7 check, deflecting of the f5 knight. And now we push the move pawn to h6. Now we have two threats. The first threat is to push our pawn and make it a new queen on the h8 square. And the second threat is to capture the knight and simply win back material and promote it to a queen again on the g8 square. So how is your opponent going to defend against all of this? Well, your opponent can go for the move king to f7. But now, to your opponent's surprise, he will play the move pawn to h7, and this game is a clear loss for your opponent, as there is simply no way to stop your pawn and all the places are simply blocked by your pawn or by the knight itself. So this position is a clear loss for your opponent. But what if instead of going king to f7 over here, opponent goes for knight to f5? Well, we go for the move pawn to h7, and again nothing is stopping us from becoming a new queen. Now I have this same position for you but with a little change. Now this is the change. The king is not on the h1 square, it is on the g2 square. So what does this change even matter? Yes, it matters a lot, and now you will get it to know. Because now when the king is not on the h1 square and is on the g2 square, there is knight to h4 and knight to f4 check. So it costs a lot of damage to the white king, and yeah, you will just see it now. Knight g7 check, h6, knight to f5, attacking on the pawn. And now if we play the move pawn to h7, then your opponent has a surprise pact for you. Knight to h4 check, and your opponent surprisingly covers the queening square, and the king is easily going to get in and capture your pawn. So this tells us that the position of the pieces in knight and pawn endgames matter a lot, because when the king wasn't on the h1 square and was on the g2 square, it was prone to a lot of checks which probably could cover the queening square. And also when the knight and the king were in such a position where there could be a knight fork, we could deflect off your opponent's knight and win the game. So this can give you a clear idea that the knights are a very short range pieces and they can cause a lot of damage to your opponent while deflection, zugzwang, and a lot of other tactics. So always be on the lookout for them. Now we come on to exercise number 1. Now we are going to learn the general rule of the knight versus pawn endgames. Okay, so this is a position. Your opponent has a king and the pawn. The king is a bit separated from the pawn, and yeah, the pawn is on the rook file. So how are you going to win this game? Not win, but how to draw this game? Well, here is the answer. Your king simply can't come to the rescue as it's just too far away. Now, only thing which you have is your knight, but now you will think that like what is the knight gonna actually do, because the knight can only 3 squares, but it can do a lot. Okay, so now we are going to see the general rule, and the rule says that we must always cover the square in front of the pawn, which is the h2 square. And for example, in a position like this where the pawn is on the h5 square on the rook file, we have to cover the h4 square, and the position is a draw, as we keep jumping our knight on these squares and the king can never catch us. Yes, this is theoretically a draw. It may look surprising for you, but yeah, it is how it is. Now there is an exception where this position simply doesn't work. This is the position where it is an exception, because when we are to cover the queening square and the end square, it is simply not possible. As if we try to cover the square by playing knight to h1, opponent can simply get closer like this, and finally attack on our knight, and there is no way we can defend our knight, and we are going to lose the game in just a few moves. However, there is also secret trick which you can use to draw this game, but we are going to learn it in the second exercise. So for now, let us jump upon this position. Now you need to cover the square in front of the pawn. I think that's enough for you. Now take your time and find the answer. I hope that you found the move. Knight to e3 check, king to e2 and knight to g4. Now we cover the important h2 square, and now no matter what our opponent does, he's not going to get in. So king to f3, knight to h2 check. We jump upon the key squares, which are these as you remember. Knight to e3, and when your opponent pushes the move pawn to h2, again, what is the key moment here? The pieces are in such a way that a knight fork can occur. Then what are you waiting for? Knight to f1 check clearly wins the game over here for white. And now after knight takes on h2, this game is a clear draw and you just saved a losing game. Congratulations. Now moving on to exercise number 2. Now this one is a bit complicated, but I know that you can do it as well. Over here it is the same exceptional position which I had showed you earlier. And that the pawn is on the verge of becoming a new queen, but it is just stopped by a 1 square and a 1 piece or knight. So how are you going to defend this position? Well, it's very easy. You start off with the moves king to c2 and white plays king to c6. Now the main goal is to reach till the f2 square and reach a stalemating position. But it's not going to be that easy. King to d1, knight to h1. This is an important move as it simply cuts off your opponent's chance on playing king to f2 and attacking your knight directly. So opponent comes to e1. We bring our king and finally we reach this position where it is the critical moment. Now try to find the move. Yes. Is king to f3, and after king takes on h1, boom, king to f2 is a brilliant stalemate and you have just saved another losing game thanks to my video. And I think that there is a big red subscribe button down the video and also a big grey like button, so please push those because it helps us a lot. So moving on to exercise number 3. Now this is the last exercise and this is one of the most hardest exercise I have ever given to you until now, because this requires a lot of calculation and a lot of precise moves. So I will give you this time 10 seconds to think for the move, or you can also pause the video over here. So yeah, I hope you have found the move. Knight to b4. What a brilliant move it is. The plan is to go knight to d5, knight to f6 and cover the h5 square, the square in front of the pawn. Remember how we simply go around, try to cover the square in front of the pawn. Okay, now our opponent blocks the f4 square. So now what are we gonna do? Well, knight to h5. The pawn advances, but we are not scared. Now we play the move knight to c4. Now our plan is not to cover the h3 square but to cover the h2 square, as the pawn is going to advance and we can easily cover the h2 square then. But our opponent is smart. He plays the move king to f3. Okay, knight to e5 check, king g3. Now knight to c4. Now what's the idea over here? Well, the idea is simple. After h3, your opponent must make some progress or the game is simply going to be a draw. We play the move knight to e3 and now in single check we can easily cover the h2 square and there is no way our opponent can stop it. If our opponent tries to go with king to f2, we can again play knight to g4 and we have again reached the same position which we had seen in example number 1. So over here your opponent is not going to go for that move. After knight to e3, your opponent will go for the move pawn to h2. Sorry, king to f3. But again, you have a brilliant move over here. King to f1, stopping the pawn, and as we have seen before, we reach the earlier position where we fork the king and finally we take the pawn. So these were a bit tough and a sort of intermediate level exercises, but it will give you a clear and a brief idea of how knight and pawn in games work. Of course, this is not the last part, but more parts are also coming up, so stay tuned for it. And always remember, try to cover the square in front of the pawn if it is a rook pawn. If it is a center pawn, then it is a bit hard, but still follow the rule and don't forget the basics. And also try for tactics like zugzwang and deflection. We have not yet learned zugzwang, but we will learn it very soon in the part 3 or probably part 4 of this video. So I hope you learned something from this video and I hope to see you in the next one. Till then, stay tuned, have a great day and bye.